Walking alone is a way to ease your mind. But what would you do about the shadows that lurk behind? Don't be afraid of the dark, for this is Tales from Around the Campfire. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Tales from Around the Campfire, episode 15, the final episode of the season, and just the final episode in general. Um, but yeah, so I don't know what to say. I am choked up, because it's the final episode, and well, you know, there's a special coming on October. I mean, on Halloween, but that is beside the point. The point is, hopefully, you guys had a really great time imagining yourself sitting here with me in Yield Campfire. So, what I was talking about yesterday and in the comment section down below is that um, we're going to be, how do I put it, revisiting a book that we read last year uh, when we were um, the After Dark podcast. We're going to be reading Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, collected from folklore and retold by Alvin Schwartz, drawing by Stefan Gamel. I don't know. Listen, we're in archive.com because I still can't find my book. I do have the book, but we are going to be reading it off of the PDF right here. So, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. We're gonna go in alphabetical order, if I do say so myself. Hold up, I'm trying to find the first story here. Okay, so the first story is called "Strange, Scary Things." Pioneers used to entertain themselves by telling scary stories. At night, they might gather around somebody's cabin or around a fire and see who could scare the others the most. Some girls and boys in my town, do the same thing today. They get together at somebody's house and they turn out the lights and eat popcorn and scare one another half to death. Telling scary stories is something people have done for thousands of years. For most of us, like being scared in that way. Since there isn't any danger, we think of it's fun. There are a great many scary stories to tell. There are ghost stories, there are tales of witches, devils, boogeyman zombies, and vampires. There are tales of monstrous creatures out of other danger. There are even stories that make us laugh at all the scariness. Some of those tales are very old and they are told around the world. Most have the same origins. They are based on things that people saw or heard or experienced or thought they did. Many years ago, a young prince became famous for a scary story he started to tell, but did not finish. His name was Mamelius, and he probably was 9 or 10 years old. William Shakespeare told about him in The Winter's Tale. It was a dark winter's day, and his mother, the queen, asked him for a story. A sad tale's best for winter, he said. I have one of sprites and goblins. Do your best to frighten me with your sprites, she said. You're powerful at it. I shall tell it softly, he said. Yond cricket shall not hear it. And he began. There was a man dwelt by a churchyard, but that was as far as he got, for at that moment the king came in and arrested the queen and took her away. And soon after that, Mamilius died. No one knows how he would have finished the story if you started as he did. What would you tell? Most scary stories are of course meant to be told. They are more scary that way, how how you tell them is important. As Mamilius knew, the best way is to speak softly so that your listeners lean forward to catch your words, and to speak slowly so that the voice sounds scary. And the best time to tell these stories are at night, in the dark and the gloom. It is easy for someone to listen to imagine all sorts of strange and scary things. That was written by Alvin Schwartz, and he has a point. Scary stories are best um, best told in the dark. But we are going to be moving on. The first real story is called The Big Toe. A boy was digging at the edge of the garden when he saw a big toe. He tried to pick it up, but it was stuck on something, so he gave it a good hard jerk and it came off in his hand. Then he heard something groan and scampered away. The boy took the toe to the kitchen and showed it to his mother. It looks nice and plump, she says. I'll put it in the soup, and we'll have it for supper. That night his father carved the toe into 3 pieces, and they each had a piece. Then they did the dishes, and when it got dark, they went to bed. The boy fell asleep almost at once, but in the middle of the night a sound awoke in him. It was something out of the streets. It was a voice, and it was calling to him. Where's my toe? It groaned. When the boy heard that, he got scared, but he thought, it doesn't know where I am. It'll never find me. Then he heard the voice once more, only now it was closer. Where is my toe? It groaned. The boy pulled the blanket over his head and closed his eyes. I'll go to sleep, he thought, and when I wake up, it'll all be gone. But soon he heard the back door open, and again the voice. Where's my toe? It groaned. When the boy heard footsteps move through the kitchen and through the dining room, into the living room, into the front hall, then slowly they climbed the stairs. Closer and closer they came, so they were in the upstairs hall. Now they were outside his door. Where's my toe? The voice groaned. His door opened, shaking with fear. He listened as the footsteps slowly moved through the dark towards his bed. Then they stopped. Where's my toe? He groaned. At this point, then the big toe had the big toe also has another ending. When the boy hears the voice calling for its toe, he finds a strange-looking creature up inside the chimney. The boy is so frightened he can't move. He just stands there and stares at it. Finally, he asks, "Why you got such big eyes for?" And the creature answers, "To look you through and through." "What's such big claws for?" "To scratch up your grave." "What such big mouth for?" "To swallow you whole." "What you got sharp teeth for?" "To chomp your bones." I'm not gonna scream because I am alone after all. Okay, moving on to the next story called The Walk. My uncle was walking down a lonely dirt road one day. He came up a man who also was walking down the road. The man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was scared of my uncle, and my uncle was scared of that man. But they kept on walking, and it began to get dark. The man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was very scared of my uncle, and my uncle was very scared of the man. But they kept on walking, and they came to the big woods. It was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was really scared of my uncle, and my uncle was really scared of the man. But they kept on walking, and deep down into the woods, they went in. It was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was horribly scared of my uncle, and my uncle was terribly scared of the man. It says scream, but like I said, I ain't gonna scream. Moving on. What do you come for? There was an old woman who lived all by herself, and she was very lonely. Sitting in the kitchen one night, she said, "Oh, I wish I had some company." No sooner had she spoken than down the chimney tumbled 2 feet, which the flesh had rotted. The old woman's eyes bulged with terror. Then legs dropped in the hearth and attached themselves to the feet. Then a body tumbled down, and then 2 arms, and a man's head. As the old woman watched the parts come together into a great gangling man, the man danced around and around the room. Faster and faster he went. Then he stopped and looked into her eyes. "What do you come for?" she asked in a small voice, with a shiver and hook. "What do I come for?" he said. "I came for you." Ooh, that was a good one. Mitai Dodie Walker. Mitai Dodie Walker? Okay. There was a haunted house where every night a bloody head fell down the chimney. At least that's what people said. So nobody would stay overnight. Then a rich man offered $200 to whoever did it. Uh, and this boy, he said he would try it if he could have his dog with him. So it was settled. The very next night, the boy went to the house with his dog. To make it more cheerful, he started a fire in the fireplace. Then he sat on the front of the fire and waited, and his dog waited with him. For a while, nothing happened, but a little further midnight, he heard something singing softly and sadly off in the woods. The singing sounded something like this: Me tidy doty walker. It's just somebody singing, the boy told himself, but he was frightened. Then his dog answered the song softly and sadly. It sang, Lynchy, kinchy, coly moly, dingo, dingo. The boy could not believe his ears. His dog had never uttered a word before. Then, a few minutes later, he heard a singing again. Now, it was closer and louder, but the words were the same. Me tidy didy walker. The time the boy tried to stop his dog from answering, he was afraid that whoever was singing would hear it and come after him. But his dog paid no attention, and again it sang, Lynchy kinchy coly moly, dingo dingo. Half hour later, the boy heard the singing again. Now it was on the backyard, and the song was the same. Me tidy didy walker. Dodie? Dodie walker. Again, the boy tried to keep his dog quiet, but the dog sang out louder than ever. Lynchy, kinchy, coly moly, dingo, dingo. So the boy heard the singing again. Now it was coming down the chimney. Me tidy, Dodie Walker. The dog sang back. Lynchy, kinchy, coly moly, dingo, dingo. Suddenly, a bloody head fell off the chimney. It missed the fire and landed right next to the dog. The dog took one look and fell over dead from fright. The head turned and stared at the boy, slowly opening his mouth. That was a good one, too. A man who lived in Leeds. Some say this rhyme doesn't mean anything, others not true. There was a man who lived in Leeds. He filled his garden full of seeds. And when the seeds began to grow, it was like a garden filled with snow. But when the snow began to melt, it was like a ship without a belt. And when the ship began to sail, it was like a bird without a tail. And the bird began to fly. It was like an eagle in the sky. And the sky began to roar. It was like a lion at my door. Then, when the door began to crack, it was like a penknife in my back. And when my back began to bleed, I was dead. Dead indeed. Old woman, all skin and bone. There was an old woman, all skin and bone, who lived near the graveyard, all alone. Ooh. She thought she could go to the church one day to hear the parson preach and pray. Ooh. And when she came to the church house style, she thought she'd stop and rest a while. Ooh. When she came up the door, she thought she stopped and rest some more. But when she turned and looked around, she saw a corpse upon the ground. From its nose down to its chin, the worms crawled out and the worms crawled in. The woman to the preacher said, "Shall I look like that when I'm dead?" The preacher to the woman said, "You'll look like that when you are dead." I think it was a song. It has like a score up here in the front. I don't know how to read sheet music, but you know, maybe it was a good song. Who knows? The Thing. Ted Martin and Sam Miller were good friends. They spent a lot of time together on this particular night. They were sitting in a fence near the post office, talking about one thing and another. There was a field of turnips across the road. Suddenly, they saw something crawl up from the fields and stand up. It looked like a man, but in the dark, it was hard to tell for sure. Then it was gone. But soon it appeared again. It walked halfway across the road. Then it turned around and went back into the field. Then it came out a third time and started towards them. By now, Ted and Sam were scared and they started running. But when they finally stopped, they decided they were being foolish. Foolish. They weren't sure what had scared them, so they decided to go back and get a better look. Pretty soon they saw it, for it was coming to meet them. It was wearing black pants and a white shirt and a black suspenders. Sam said, "I'm going to try to touch it. Then we'll know if it's real." He walked up he walked up to it and peered into its face. It had bright penetrating eyes sunk deep into his head. It looked like a skeleton. Ted took one look and screamed, and again he and Sam ran. But this time the skeleton followed. When they got to Ted's house, they stood in the doorway and watched. It stayed out in the road for a while, then it disappeared. A year later, Ted got sick and died. Towards the end, Sam sat up with him every night. The night Ted died, Sam said, he looked just like a skeleton. Cold as clay. A farmer had a daughter for whom he cared more than anything in the earth. She fell in love with the farmhand named Jim, but the farmer did not think Jim was good enough for his daughter. To keep them apart, he sent her to live with her uncle on the other side of the country. Soon after she left, Jim got sick and wasted away and died. Everyone said he died of a broken heart. The farmer felt so guilty about Jim's death he could not tell his daughter what had happened. She continued thinking about Jim and the life they might have had together. One night, many weeks later, there was a knock on her uncle's door. Then the girl opened the door. Jim was standing there. "Your father asked me to get you," he said. "I came on his best horse." "Is there anything wrong?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. She packed up a few things and left. She rode behind him, clinging to his waist. Soon he complained about a headache. "It aches something terrible," he said to her. She put her hand on his forehead. "Why, you're cold as clay," she said. "I hope you're not ill." And she wrapped her handkerchief around his head. They traveled so swiftly that in a few hours they reached the farm. The girl quickly dismounted and knocked on the door. Her father was startled to see her. "Didn't you send for me?" she asked. "No, I didn't," he said. She turned to Jim, but he was gone. So was the horse. They went to the stable to look for them. The horse was there. I was covered with sweat and trembling with fear, but there was no sign of Jim. Terrified, her father told her the truth about Jim's death. Then quickly he went to see Jim's parents. They decided to open his grave. The corpse was in its coffin, but around its head they found the girl's handkerchief. At the very least, that ghost wasn't evil. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. So I want to take this time to thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. Episode 15, dude. Oh man, we're in the middle of October now. Middle-ish of October, because it's like the 31 days. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is that this is exciting. All right, first season is gonna end, and out comes a special. But next year, I do plan on being more prepared in having this little story time telling, and hopefully with better visuals. And like I said, if I have a full year to practice, and practice I will. But yes, so thank you guys for coming. I really do appreciate it. And, guess what's never going to end, huh? Me telling you guys to not be on your phones while driving. That is never gonna end, man. You don't have to check your phones while you drive. Just focus on driving. You know, leave the text behind. Leave the call behind. Leave um just leave your phone in your pocket or give it to your mom's, dad's, or anybody who's in the car that you trust, and just be like, hey, if like how do I put it? If anybody calls, hit me up. You know what I mean? Answer the phone, be like I'm driving, or don't do anything at all. That's mostly the best way to do it. But yeah, so please stop playing with your phones while you drive. For the last time, I'm telling you this, and I plead you to take my word up on it. And yeah. This next story is called The White Wolf. The timber wolves around French Creek had gotten out of hand. There were so many wolves, the farmers could not stop them from killing their cattle and sheep. So the state put a bounty on them. It would pay a hunter $10 for every wolf pelt he turned in. The butcher in town named Bill Williams thought that it was pretty good money. He stopped working as a butcher and started killing wolves. He was good at it. Every year he killed over 500 of them. That came to more than $5,000. It was quite a bit of money in these days. After 4 or 5 years, Bill had killed so many wolves that there were hardly any left in the area, so he retired. He then vowed never to harm another wolf because wolves had made him rich. Then one day, a farmer reported that a white wolf had killed 2 of his sheep. He had shot at it and hit it, but the bullets didn't have any effect on him. Soon, that wolf was seen all over the countryside, killing and running, but nobody would stop it. One day, it came to Bill's yard and killed his pet cow. Bill forgot about his decision never to harm another wolf. He went into town the next morning and bought a young lamb for bait. He took it out in the mill and tied it to a tree. Then, he backed off 50 yards and sat down under the tree with the gun in his lap, waiting. When Bill didn't come back, his friends started looking for him. Finally, they found the lamb. It was still tied to a tree. It was hungry, but it was alive. Then they found Bill. He was still sitting against a tree, but he was dead. His throat had been torn open, but there was no sign of a struggle. His gun hadn't been fired, and there were no tracks in the soil around him. As for the white wolf, it was never seen again. The Haunted House. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest for at a house in the settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house. Went in, built himself a good fire, lit a lamp, and sat there reading the Bible. Then, just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar, walking back and forth, back and forth. Then, it sounded like somebody was trying to scream, and he got choked off. Then, there was a lot of thrashing around, struggled, and finally everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps became closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and the door began to open. He jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easy, like there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up and laid the book to the chair and went to mend the fire. The haunt started walking again, and step, step, step up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn, and the door open again. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do. Then she just faded. The old preacher waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man. He he thought, wait, he thought, yeah, he thought he'd be able to see it though, see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, and he sat down and waited. It was long before he heard the haunt start up again, slowly, step, 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 closer and closer, step, step. It was right at the door again. The preacher stood up, held his Bible out before him. Then the doorknob slowly turned and the door opened wide. This time the preacher spoke quietly. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room straight to him and took off his coat. It was a young woman, about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dripping off her face, so he could see the bone and part of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was some sort of blue light. Uh, okay. Thought I heard footsteps again. Where was I? They were certain to the voices that coming and going and the wind blowing. She told how her lover and had killed her for her money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand and lay it in the collection. Played at the church meeting, he'd find out who had murdered her. He said, "If you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church." The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and she sunk down towards the floor again and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and then uh, a certain man happened to touch it. It stuck to his hand. The man jumped and rubbed off and scraped and tore at the bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to scream like he was going crazy, while he confessed to the murder, and they took him to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to the house on one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig up under the heart rock. He did, and he found a big sack of money. And where that haunt had held on to his coat, the print of those bony fingers was buried right into the cloth. It never did come out. That was pretty good. I mean, justice, justice for all, if I'm not mistaken. The Guest. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually they arrived in time for supper, but they had gotten a late start, and now it was getting dark. So they decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go on in the morning. Just off the road, they saw a small house in the woods. "Maybe they rent rooms," the wife said, so they stopped to ask. An elderly man and a woman came to the door. They didn't rent rooms, they said, but they would be glad to have them stay overnight as their guests. They had plenty of room, and they would enjoy the company. The old woman made coffee and brought out some cake, and the four of them talked for a while. When the young couple were taken to their room, there again explained that they wanted to pay for this room, but the old man said he could not accept the money. The young couple got up early in the morning before the host had awoken, and the table near the front door they left an envelope with some money in it for the room. They went on the next town. They stopped in a restaurant and had breakfast. When they told the owner where they had stayed, he was shocked. "That can't be," he said. "That house burned to the ground, and the man and the woman who lived there died in the fire." The young couple could not believe it, so they went back to the house. Only now there was no house. All they found was a burned out shell. They stood staring at the ruins, trying to understand what happened. Then the woman screamed. In the rubble was a badly burned table. where, like the one they had seen at the front door, on the table was the envelope they had left that morning. The Here song, I guess is a song. Like I said, I don't know the rhythm of it, so I'm just gonna read it. Don't you ever laugh at the here's goes, as the here's goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet, from your head down to your feet. They put you in a big black box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. All goes well for about a week when your coffin begins to leak. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. The worms play Pinocchio on your snout. Okay? They eat out your eyes, they eat out your nose. They eat the jelly between your toes. A big green worm with rolling eyes crawls in your stomach and out your eyes. Your stomach turns a slimy green and pus pours out like whipping cream. You spread you spread it onto the slice. You spread out the slice of bread, and that's what you eat when you're dead. The girl who stood in the grave. Some boys and girls were at a party one night. They were there was a graveyard down the street, and they were talking about how scary it was. Don't ever stand on the graveyard after dark. One of the boys said, the person inside will grab you. He'll pull you under." "That's not true," one of the girls said. "It's just a superstition. I'll give you $1 if you stand on the grave," said the boy. "A grave doesn't scare me," the girl said. "I'll do it right now." The boy handed her a knife. "Stick this in the ground on one of the graves," he said. "Then we'll know if you were there." The graveyard was filled with shadows and was quiet as death. "There is nothing to be scared of," the girl told herself, but she was scared anyways. She picked out a grave and stood on it, then quickly bent and plunged the knife into the soil. Then he started to leave, but suddenly she couldn't get away. Something was holding her back. She tried a second time to leave, but she couldn't move. She was filled with terror. "Something has got me," she screamed, and she fell to the ground. When she didn't come back, the others went to look for her. They found her body sprawled across the grave. Without realizing it, she had plunged a knife through her skirt and had pinned to the ground. It was only the knife that held her. She had died of fright. You know what? We are gonna end it right here. I don't know how many stories we read, but that was fun nonetheless. And like I said, it's the last episode of the season. So thank you guys for coming. I really do appreciate it. If you guys want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, you can do so. The links will be in the description below. Now that the season's over, you can still share your stories on my Instagram or on, the comment section down below. I'll read them. If you guys want me to do another, off-season episode, I'll be more than glad to read a couple stories for you guys. And, but yeah, so that's that. And, but yeah, thank you guys for coming. Yeah, I am trying not to get choked up. I'm trying to get choked up. Last episode of the season. That was great. That was great. Will I do it again next year? Yes. Tales from Around the Campfire Season 2 will be coming next year. And that would be great. Tomorrow, what we're going to play. I have 2 games, right? I guess they're like campaign games. One of them is called The Terrible Old Man, and the other one's called The Last Crown. I can't really read the Last Crown Midnight something. I can't really read the Midnight Horror. There we go. So I have two games. I'll probably play The Terrible Old Man because it's like more of a point and click game, and it was free to play, so it's on Steam right now if you guys want to play it. And it's a Lovecraftian style game, and actually it's like an adaptation of a story by Lovecraft. But like I said, thank you guys for coming. I really do appreciate it. And for the last time this season, I would like to say, when the dust settles in and the moon begins to quell the sun, remember to always look behind you Until the next one. Peace out, everybody.